Hi, I'm Tim Farrell. Welcome back to the TSFA Virtual Learning on Demand. I'm honored to be presenting this series on the elements and principles of design. And if you're joining us now, this is part 4 for us. This is texture as an element of floral design. If you haven't seen the other ones, go back on demand and you can look at them anytime, 24/7, in the comfort of your home or office, whenever it's convenient for you. But we've already covered line, form, and space. And today we're going to cover texture. So sit down, make yourself comfortable, and get ready to learn. During this entire series, we're going to be referring to this book, which is the AIFD Guide to Floral Design. It is an incredible publication, and you can get this by looking at the information on the slide we're going to pop up on the screen for you so you can see how you can get this through the Texas State Florist Association. This book will be a great guide for you when you're going for accreditation, such as your PCF, your Professional Certified Florist Accreditation from the Texas State Florist Association, or other accreditations like your AIFD or your CFD from the American Institute of Floral Designers. In using this as a study guide and practicing the things you've learned in this book in your work, it's just a way to set you up for success. This publication is chock full of knowledge. It has, of course, a chapter on the elements and principles of floral design, which we're going to be using, but it also has chapters on design techniques, design terminology. It has a special section on weddings and events, a section just for retail floristry, so you can get some tips of how to run a successful business. There's also glossaries in here, and there's indexes, so you can look up almost anything you need to know about floral design at any time. It's a great read. It's put together by florists for florists. So get yourself a copy. You won't regret it. So let's talk about texture. As an element of floral design, texture is the surface qualities of the materials as perceived by sight or touch. Texture is an absolutely fascinating element of design and is very important in today's environment. It's when we want to use this element to literally draw people into our work, to make them want to just not only explore it with their eyes, but explore it with their hands, and maybe trying to make sense between the two. The interesting part about this for us is that we as a people, as a society, have changed over the last 100 or so years. We've grown from being a society where many people worked with their hands all day long, in either manufacturing or factories, or maybe agricultural fields or different occupations like that, where many people now actually are limited to that almost two-dimensional space and flat surface of a keyboard or a cell phone all day long. So we are actually missing that element of texture in our lives more than ever before. And that's why incorporating that into your floral design and into your work becomes so beneficial for us as floral designers. People actually are what we call tactile deprived. So when they walk into an environment like a flower shop where they see beautiful flowers and vases and things, the brain starts to come alive on all engines, and some of which have been asleep for a while. And it becomes a very invigorating, very human experience. The brain is starting to try to make sense between what it sees and what it touches. And you will start thinking along this line. You'll say, oh my gosh, that looks soft and fluffy. Is it? Yes, it is. Or that looks prickly. Is it? Maybe it is. And it's the brain making the connection between the actual and the visual that makes that experience for us so wonderful in a flower shop or around any floral materials. So for this design, we're going to use a very simple mechanic. And this is our mechanic for this. It's part of the Syndicate Sales line that was given to them by Holly Chappell, and it's part of her pillow line where there's usually 2 pieces that connect to each other to make a pillow, but we're actually only going to use one half of this. And just by laying that half on top of the vase. That'll give us a network to sew through. Syndicate Sales is one of our underwriters for this whole series. So we're so thrilled to have them as a partner in this, in our education, and using their products is going to be really beneficial for us all through the series. So now let's just get into some flowers and see what we can do with texture in our design. We're going to start with this beautiful vase. This is what I selected for this project, and it is part of Teleflor's collection. It is the blue lapis vase, which is the gemstone vase art glass. It's a beautiful container with a very sleek finish, but even the coloration on here and the way it almost ombres from blue to green, and it actually feels rougher on the outside than you'd imagine. So it actually does have a texture to it. But it's a beautiful vase to start with, and we're going to think about what flowers to pair with this. And there's many different options that we could choose, but I selected some that I think are going to work really well just to show you texture in design. So I've got some flowers here, and these are the materials that I've decided to use. And you can see, what a great combination of different things. We have the beautiful hydrangea in that almost a violet, blue-violet color. We have the delphinium in a royal or cobalt blue. Beautiful Telstar iris in another variety of blue. And then we have some greens like the green trick dianthus, which again look very textural and very much like moss, and your fingers just want to explore them when you see them. We also have some ferns, and we have some echeveria in here as well too. So let's see, as we put these in the container, how this is going to work for us and how we can really achieve a great element of texture in this design. So the half we're just going to take, and it can fit on almost any vase, but we're just going to rest it right on top of the container. Even though you can see it now, by the time you get the florals in there, you will not be able to see it. And you don't need to actually secure this onto the container, because the flowers, as they're put in there, will weigh them in nicely and keep them in the right place. Some designers might choose to put a piece of tape there, but I think this, just used like this, is just fine. So the first flower we're going to start with is this gorgeous hydrangea, and we're going to take the stem and give it a real nice cut, and we're going to put it into the vase, leaning basically towards the front. So as you can see, the blossoms will come down and will kind of break the plane from the top of the container and really start to give us unity. You can see how the color just really ties into what's here. And we have another smaller piece. We're going to take that other piece. We're going to cut it the same way with a nice sharp knife, and we're going to sew that through in a different place and tuck that down in there so that now we have actually a network of the hydrangea head that we can start to place these other floral materials through, and they'll stay pretty much in place where we want them to be. Let's see, what else should we put in here? Let's talk about maybe these blue iris. These are just gorgeous. And if we get one of the iris, give it a cut, and then just nicely work that in there. And you'll see we get another one, just another small cut. Nicely work that in there as well too. You can really feel how the hydrangea head and the mechanic of the pillow hold these flower stems in place. We'll take a third one and drop it down a little bit closer. But what I wanted to show you with this, and we're already seeing it come alive already, is the fact that even though we're working with very similar color tones, it's the form, which is the shape, and the texture of these flowers that starts to jump out at whoever's viewing this arrangement. So we kind of limited ourselves on color so that we could actually see how the element of texture is important in this design. We'll take some of this beautiful delphinium, and I love the real rich hue that's on this, and we're going to work this in here because delphinium, again, has a very different texture from the iris. It's closer in color to the iris, but has a very different texture. So it's almost going to continue up the texture that we see at the base with this like fluffy, multi-petaled hydrangea. It's going to kind of continue that up into the design. And we'll take another one, and we'll work that maybe towards the back. And a couple of these in the back are always nice because, number one, it'll bring depth to your design where your eye goes through to the back. But it also starts to stabilize the design because the more stems that you have woven into this network, the more stable the design is going to be, and the flowers are going to move around even less upon delivery. So we have some basic florals in there, and it is very pretty, but let's add some other things. So how about this aspidistra leaf? And this is, again, where we're using texture as a contrast. We have the fluffy, ruffly petals of the hydrangea, and now we're going to contrast that with this very sleek and smooth, almost leather-like appearance of the aspidistra leaf. So if we cut that and put that in there, and maybe we're just going to take another one, and we're going to put this on maybe right underneath this. I'm going to work that in there as well too. And just the two of them together are just a very contrasting texture. We'll go next to the fern fronds, and again, maybe we'll take off some of the foliage that's on these, and we're going to bring these out through the other side here to give us another movement in this design. And another one, we'll take off almost all of the material because we don't want this to be too heavy, and we want it to be, again, different, both in line and in texture from other materials we have in the design. And then if we take some of this beautiful green trick, and I'm saying maybe we're going to put these off to this side here. We're going to take a cluster of these and work them in some tighter and then some out a little bit further. And if we work these into the design very closely, again, you can almost feel the texture of this as you put them in, but you almost feel the design becoming more and more stable with the different stems crossing inside of the design. And maybe just another one here. So maybe towards the front, I could put this one in. And let's work that one down into this area. And sometimes we need to kind of wiggle the stems a little bit to get them through, but they'll eventually go exactly where we want them to be. There we go. And again, just a contrasting texture to the blue floral of the hydrangea. And then last but not least, we're going to add in these echeveria. And I think if we've already taken these and we put a wire through them and tape them into place, but if we take these and we put the first one, just like that, floating it into the hydrangea head, and then take a second one, and we're going to work that right on top of it, almost layering one on top of the other. You can really see how, look at the texture of this. It's almost like a stone texture because the leaves of the succulents are so full of water and so robust that it becomes a very hard texture and very smooth texture on top of this very fluffy texture of the hydrangea. So that's just a beginning to exploring texture and design. And I think you'll agree with me that as you look at this design, you not only want to come up to it to see it closer with your eyes, but you want to bring your fingers right into it and explore everything that's happening in the design. So let's look at two more designs and see how we can find out more about texture and floral design. Now, when we take it to a next level, we get something like this. This is lots of different textures. So there's so many things for the eye to explore and then to find ways to connect with the sense of touch as well, too. We have the very rough, very hard surfaces of the branches that were put together to make a basket type feature, and then this complementary orb that goes in the top so that the entire composition makes sense with the wood that runs through it. But look inside the design, and that's really the goal. We want to bring people into our design and have them just want to explore it with their eyes as well as their hands. We have the beautiful roses and spray roses. These spray roses are actually from Rio, and they're a fantastic partner of ours as well too, that we're glad to have them as an underwriter. And this one is called Yellow Babe, a very, very bright yellow, but beautiful, beautiful yellow rose and spray rose to have in there. And you'll see we have that paired right next to this wood-toned eucalyptus pod. So having the satiny texture of the petals of the roses right next to the very hard berry wood-looking eucalyptus pod is a great contrast. And it's contrasted again by having the pincushion protea and the solidago as the next thing in line. So your eye goes from one texture to another texture to a completely different texture in even this short space of this design. As we rotate this around, you'll see so many different things for us to find. We have more of the solidago, and then even the bear grass as it just basically fountains out of this arrangement. We have the eucalyptus here, which is the gunny eucalyptus, again making another motion, but another texture to have in the design. We spin around and then we find a pair of the gorgeous gerbers, which again have that big flower head with a very satiny, almost a velvety center to it, but a satiny petal. So again, more texture in design. And we go around and around, and we find the aspidistra leaves used like ribbon, making loops and just curling inside and low in the design. And again, even more roses. These beautiful roses are from Primavera roses, which are just a gorgeous rose and big full-bodied hybrid tea rose to have in the design. And then last but not least, we find this area with the chrysanthemum, that multi-petal structure that has that central radial axis that everything comes out of. That, again, very fluffy, very textural. And then the bells of Ireland, even something different as far as texture and design. So as you can see, this design in and of itself is just a treat for the senses. Not only visual, but touch. And again, limiting color allows you to see how important texture is in a design such as this. And now let's see how we can appreciate texture in a totally different composition. In this design, you'll see we've started with the Enchanted Spring vase from Teleflora, and we've taken a look at the vase itself and notice it had that aqua metallic glass finish to it. What we wanted to do was to extend that same texture up into the arrangement. So we've gotten some of the Mitsumato branches and we've used some Design Master, 2 different paints from Design Master, to coat that to give it the same look and same texture as the vases below. So we first evenly coated it with super silver to give it a great base coat and that metallic coat to begin with. And then we lightly sprayed aqua on top of that to give it the color that matched so nicely and the texture that matches so nicely in the vase. So these Mitsumato branches almost become a continuation of the vase down below. We've added into this some bells of Ireland with other tall spikes and these almost phoenix-like positions where everything's just coming up and rising up out of the arrangement to mimic the Mitsumato branches that are there already. And then we've taken some of the bells of Ireland and cut them into small florets and worked them in low, as well as using the reindeer moss, which is again another texture, into the base of this arrangement. So let's turn this around and see. So your eye almost doesn't know from a distance a difference between the two, but as you get up close, you'll see it's the texture that makes a difference between the reindeer moss and the bells of Ireland blossoms that are cut down low in this design. We've put into this design just one beautiful, interesting flower for a great focal point, and that's this anthurium. But again, the texture of the anthurium is totally different than everything else. It's not a hard, glossy texture, but a soft, glossy texture, which looks like leather almost. So this beautiful flower, because of the color and the texture, stands out as a great point in this design. So let's just take it one step further by adding a non-floral component to this composition. So I've chosen yarn, and if you see, you'll see some orbs of yarn that are placed rhythmically through this design to bring your eye up or down through the design. Those spheres were just created by using a bit of the yarn in my hand, just twirling it around each other like an old-fashioned knitting ball, and then tying them at the end so they wouldn't come apart, and then placing them in the design with a wire skewer just going through there to hold that into place, or with a little bit of bullion wire up in these higher parts of the design so that the mechanic is actually disguised. We also took the yarn and took some hyacinth stakes and wrapped it very tightly around the hyacinth stake to give us a more vertical movement to repeat the movement that the Matsumoto branches have already placed in the design. So you can see that yarn adds even another layer of texture, another something special for the eye to explore, and becomes a very important and fun part of a design. Thank you for joining me today as we've explored some different options of how to incorporate texture in your design. Remember, as you're working with materials, sometimes those materials actually are, to the touch, what they are to the eye. But there's also some visual deceivers in texture. Things like thistle or rhingium look very soft and feathery, but to touch them, they can be very prickly and sharp. Opposite that, things like pincushion protea look very sharp, almost like a cactus, but when you touch them, you find out that they're very pliable and very soft. So I challenge you, explore with texture, create different compositions and different floral arrangements to find out how you can make that a very important part of your work. Join in again as we continue this series on the elements and principles of floral design with TSFA on-demand virtual learning. I'm Tim Farrell. Thank you for joining us.